Hey, what's up guys? Captain Zach here. Well, I've got some really cool footage here I'm excited to share with you. This is underwater halibut fishing footage from the very end of last season. So we're talking September of 2022. There's a little flounder working its way through. We're just doing some back trolling. So I was working across a shallow flat, just back trolling with a 7-ounce fire eye flutter bug. So using a 7-ounce jig. I've got that jig all loaded up with some herring and then some squid. See some of the starfish there, and there's a flounder in pursuit. Yeah, so these flounder, they'll show up again and again here in the footage, but they've got these tiny little mouths, so they'll try to attack this jig, but they're really gonna just be kind of pecking at the bait. But since I'm back trolling here, you see I'll end up kind of covering ground, and I like that dynamic, especially across like a shallow flat where the fish might be staging at different parts of that area. This allows you to sort of cover the ground and eventually just run into the fish. There's a halibut taking a bite. Yeah, halibut are sort of professional bait stealers, especially these little chickens. I mean, they come up and they just surgically will kind of grab the bait off the back of that jig. That was a flounder actually that was just in pursuit there. Yeah, and in full disclosure, as we're watching this GoPro rig does not have the best feel. So one of the real benefits, there's a flounder on the left hand side, if you see there, just blends right in. How cool. This was a little bit deeper, so you can see it's a little darker, and there's a halibut kind of chomping it, really just sucking that jig in. Had it hooked for a second and then it popped off. I was just about to make the excuse that one of the benefits of a jig is that you're always in like really close contact and you can feel everything. Unfortunately, that's not the case when I run the jig on the GoPro rig. So you'll notice, you might ask the question, like, boy, Zach, why are you missing all these fish? And it's because there's a definite delay with me being able to feel that fish bite, and then when I set the hook. So some really cool footage. There's 2 halibut at the same time. So these chickens are getting kind of increasingly aggressive, just sort of biting at that jig. That's a great hit. I mean, it had it all the way in its mouth there. They're just picking the bait off left and right though. So look at him just kind of grab the edge and a vicious head thump there. Had it hooked for a second and off again. So these 2 halibut are just going back and forth and just like taking the bait off piece by piece. Now I'm like up in the water column here. So just goes to show you don't always have to be just sitting down on the bottom. You know, I'm probably 10, 15 feet off the bottom there, and bang, that fish is going right back for it. Again, probably should have hooked him, but there's a freeze frame. So like they just picked that jig clean, which is just unbelievable that all those times wasn't able to kind of connect there, but still really neat to see a couple of ferocious halibut. So back down towards the bottom here, another cast. There's another halie coming up for a bite. Kind of neat to see the way they just glide so effortlessly around the jig. See, that jig's moving up and down, and it's moving sideways because, like I said, I'm back trolling. So look how aggressive the halibut's being. I mean, they're just sort of all over it, really trying to strike it, but they have to move with the current just to be able to stick with it. Another halie there. So there's 2 again. So you can see they're literally 2 halibut are fighting for that jig. Up in the water column, down, they're all over it. That is all. It's entirely in his mouth. It's kind of hard to watch that and not see a fish come to the surface. But that also sort of gives credence to this idea, and I'll say it all the time when I'm out there fishing. Like, if you miss a fish, like, boy, drop it right back down. Like, don't give up hope. Don't just reel it up straight away. You know, because if you've got any bait left, or even not bait, if you're fishing with a grub, like, you can get them to strike with just a grub. But those fish will often come back. So those halies will often strike at it again and again and again. So never get too discouraged if you miss it right off the bat. That's a flounder coming up and nibbling with this little mouth. You can see the flounder's a wider profile. It's kind of wide, it's more round. So this is some foreshadowing here. You can see that most of that was pretty calm, you know, gravel. This is not. That's a rock. There's a rock fish. You know, I think by the title of this video, you'll understand what possibly happens here. This was obviously not the intent to be dragging a jig across a rock pile. There's a quillback rockfish there. So anywhere you're finding those rockfish on these little, you know, steep bluffs around a rock pile, obviously that's not exactly where you want to be sort of dragging a jig. And I've included just a little extra footage here just to give you a sense of that bottom and the bottom makeup. All kinds of cool stuff you can kind of see right along the rocks there. And now it's coming up, so this is just making me cringe at this point. That current's going to take it, and this jig has to come up that slope. So anytime a jig has to go up a rocky slope, that is just asking for a snag. I mean, that is just a snag city. I was really fortunate not to snag it there. Somehow able to kind of be lifting it up and taking some steps up that slope. Again, general rule, you never want to be working a jig up the slope, especially on a rocky bottom. Here we are, we got up that slope and now we're back to a flat. There's a couple flounder in pursuit, so that's kind of neat watching those flounder glide across. Another flounder there. So flounder will often show up in numbers. Little rockfish behind. The jig's working all around. Also, you'll notice often I'm like hitting that jig off the bottom. You know, that is often going to trigger a strike when you kind of work it up and then let it hit the bottom, work it back up. That type of motion and noise is really good. See on the right there, a flounder just kind of swimming with it, swimming right under the jig, but keeping pace. Yeah, it's really important to be in contact with the bottom. Yeah, check this out. So the jig actually gets kind of sucked in by this sort of multi-legged creature on the bottom there. And then there's, just to the left of that, there's like a noodle looking, I don't know, an enemy or something like that, and a rockfish as well. So just a whole mix of stuff going on at the bottom there. There's another quillback rockfish. Look like a halibut head there. Yeah, there's a halibut in pursuit. Again, taking just bite after bite, working up off the bottom at this point, but that halibut's sort of following it up. You know, big bang on the bottom there. Wouldn't surprise me if that halibut turns around and takes another swipe at it. You can see the bait that it's tipped with just sort of fluttering behind it there. Yeah, there's the halibut swimming. See, he's swimming kind of sideways. That's really neat, because again, the jig itself is sort of moving along the bottom. Oh, he took a bite but missed the hook. You know, when that jig's moving like that, it forces, yeah, all in his mouth like that. That's should have been caught. Unfortunately, I think the camera just shut off a little bit right there, so I didn't have the rest of that one on film. Some kind of little fish just coming to take a bite. And a halie there, okay, taking a bite. He sort of bit the front of the jig, which is not helpful. Need to be biting the business end of that jig with a razor sharp hook. Another little halibut, and then a little fish. So those two are sort of battling it out. But when that jig's really like moving through the water, it does sort of trigger a more aggressive strike. There he goes. That's it's fully in his mouth. You know, so if that's not on the GoPro rig there, you know, if you're just fishing and you sort of feel that jig stop, you feel that extra weight, that's exactly when you set the hook. You sort of just bury it deep. Halibut on the left-hand side there. Oh, he came back and took a fierce swipe at it. So this is an aggressive fish. It's just sort of really worked up. It wants that jig. Taking bite after bite. There he goes. Now he's hooked deep. That, again, had him hooked there for a second. You know, anytime the fish actually gets most of that jig in his mouth, up to kind of that, oh, he bit the front of the jig. Wrong side. Yeah, but anytime the fish has like 3/4 of the jig in his mouth, that's usually a slam dunk. That's usually a buried hook set. Look at all the just chunks of bait and stuff floating in the water there. So every time those fish strike and miss, or they strike and grab a little piece, it's creating more and more of a kind of a scent slick, a chum slick. Oh, there's a halibut that just sort of ran right after a flounder. So the flounder is the one on the lower, right under the jig, and there's a halibut above it. It's almost like the halibut sort of scared it off. And halibut on the bottom there. I dropped it. Almost hit the halibut, actually. So flounder towards the top, and there's that halibut in pursuit. Oh, that's a shame I lifted that jig. Seemed like that halibut was going right after it. Down to a little deeper spot. There's a Pacific cod. So a Pacific cod makes an entrance here. Those are a fun fish to catch. Really good eater as well. Hard to beat a fresh Pacific cod, a really yummy, tasty whitefish. There's a halibut as well on the right. It's just sort of right above the jig there. See the halibut kind of circling. Just goes to show you, there's just such a sort of diversity of life on the bottom there, whether it's flounder or halibut or cod. Another halibut taking a bite. At the top of the jig again, that Fire Eye Glow jig. So that's glowing bright, and it's got those red eyes and sort of the red thread that sort of ties the skirt on. The fish have definitely struck at that a few times here. Now they're just in a standoff. The jig is still, and the halibut was not moving. Now that halibut's sort of in pursuit, chasing it. There's a rockfish. Just slowly working its way across the bottom here. There's a Hallie. And a rockfish. Let's see who wins the battle there. The rockfish is taking a bite. A little bait stealer. They go in and just, like I said, with precision, they just put their mouth around that piece of bait and somehow miss the razor sharp hook. This halibut looks kind of interested in the jig. Dragging the jig across the bottom, that's not a best practice. So you'd rather have that up, bouncing off the bottom. You'd rather have it like up off the bottom and then just don't go down and contact the bottom every so often. Rockfish, and this is looking like a little bit rockier spot, so this is not good to be dragging a jig across rocks. That rockfish is just dialed in. Very interesting in that jig. So this is getting scary now. I already tempted fate once and dragged it up a rock, and unfortunately, now I am snagged. This is horrible. I can't even tell you what was happening to my blood pressure above the water now. So I have basically a brand new GoPro, which is now submerged and snagged on a rock pile here. So that jig is not moving, but while it's snagged, look at the rockfish. The rockfish are just sitting there, eyeing it up. So even though the jig itself is sort of all snagged up on a piece of reef or coral or something here, that rockfish is still trying to take a look and sees that fluttering action. You'll see what I try to do is change the direction. So I'll actually slack it, and I'll eventually try to pull from the top. So I'm moving the boat as we speak to try to get a little different direction on that. You can see the rockfish still just hanging out in the area there. You know, once I figured it was snagged on one side, this is where you'll see me like slack it. I will move the boat. I'll try to adjust that angle. It's always and that rockfish is getting closer and closer, so this is like a cameo. It's just staring at that jig, wondering like what the heck's going on. There's another rockfish there too, so you can see they're all pretty curious about what's happening. Now I'm pulling from the top. You see the jig sort of angle has changed. I'm continuing to just try every different angle I can, and luckily, here we go. I get it to the opposite side. I'm giving it some pulls, some hard pulls, and bang, there we go. It let loose. So luckily I did not snag that off and leave the GoPro on the ocean floor. I was able to get it back, recover the gear, and of course recover the footage. Here we go with a halibut. This one is sort of aggressively, you know, biting at that jig. Everything after this is just icing on the cake since I didn't lose the GoPro for the day. There's a flounder coming in to take a look, but there's the halibut taking a bite. This one's pretty aggressive. And if a little fish coming after it, but if memory serves here, I think this one comes up to the boat. Yep, there we go. So now this fish is hooked. It actually slightly foul hooked, so it's right in front of the mouth. So it took a swipe at it and it got it a little earlier on, like right up almost by the, you know, by the head, by the eyes there. But either way, so this fish comes all the way up, one to the boat, a few misses there, but always really cool to see what's happening under the water. I'm always so impressed at how much life exists on the ocean floor there. So I've got some more saltwater, underwater footage I'll share with you guys here in the next few weeks, maybe the next few months, but just wanted to give you a kind of a snapshot of this. I thought it was cool footage. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and tight lines for now. We'll see you next time. Take care.